Hello, my name is Suad Leija, and this is part 4 of a small look at my life. At the end of part 3, my husband had returned to the United States after making an agreement with my grandfather to get my stepfather Manuel Leija out of jail in Chicago, and was now going to sit with ICE agents on how to implement this plan of getting him out of jail and also gaining access to their computer database as part of the agreement between my grandfather and my husband. I was to stay in Mexico City with family until Manuel was returned to Mexico. I was a hostage. I felt very alone. I have to say at this time, my husband is not and never was in any form an employee of ICE or any other agency in Immigration and Customs or the Department of Homeland Security. When my husband went back to the United States, I moved out of our apartment in an upscale section of Mexico City called Zona Rosa, a block from the Avenida Reforma, one of the main boulevards in Mexico City. A lot of shops, hotels, and embassy. I moved into my aunt's apartment in a suburb far from the center of the city. My routine with my husband was we went for long walks every day. So now I made my aunt go for long walks with me. I speak every morning when I wake up with my husband and every evening before I went to sleep. And he assures me it would be okay soon. What I did not know was that he and the government had changed part of the deal. He was not going to put up the bail. The deal was to be that Manuel had to plead guilty for one count of forgery, no other charges. He would get 18-month sentence. That would be cut in half for good behavior, and then the time served would be subtracted, which meant that he would be in jail maybe 4 months, then deported to Mexico. My husband told me to tell my family everything was on schedule and okay. During this time, I was told to set up a new mail, and then I started to receive many emails from my husband of photos of different men and women. And could I identify them? And did I know their names? I had to be very careful when I went to the different internet cafes, so no one would see the emails. I was very scared. My husband would keep telling me, just a little longer. I began to see that the government wanted me to stay so I was close to my grandfather and my uncles. My grandfather wanted me there so my husband would bring back Manuel. When you are all alone and in a situation that no one could imagine even exist, let alone live it, I was very scared and alone when I allowed myself to think about it. Here I was, 21 years old, and involved in something that if I was caught, I did not know what my family would do, but I did know how violent they were. This time also brought feelings and memories of the violence and the treatment growing up. That is part of a longer story. What I did not know was my husband was working on a plan to take me out of Mexico. He did not want either the U.S. government or my family to know he was moving me or when. He also told me to gather up pictures of family members and cell members in the United States. My grandfather was getting nervous and he wanted action. The government wanted me in Chicago to convince Manuel to take a deal. I was not told this yet, but they also wanted me to stay longer. So there was someone in the family. This all changed 3 weeks after my husband left Mexico. In late January, my husband called me and told me to prepare to leave the next night. I needed to get 2 smaller suitcases and pack what I felt was most needed, and to leave everything else. He told me I would go shopping when I got to the U.S. He told me not to tell anyone about leaving, and I was to say that my husband had returned to Mexico City for a couple of days for other businesses, and I would be staying with him for the weekend. He told me exactly what bus to take and what seat to sit in for a trip to Laredo. He would come across the border and meet me on the Mexican side of the Laredo. He told me to make sure my cell phone was fully charged also. He would be calling during the trip. We both knew how powerful my family was in Laredo and had connections to all of the gangs there and in Monterrey. If they knew I was leaving, they would have everyone looking for me. On the trip to Laredo, I just prayed I would see his face when I got off the bus, because my cell phone had no reception as I got closer to the border, and his cell phone had problems in Mexico. When the bus arrived, I went inside the terminal, which in Mexico, the bus stations are as big as airports. I called his phone and held my breath. If something went wrong, I had no options. I could not go forward, and I could not go back. He answered, and my whole life became good again. I saw him walking to me, and I smiled inside and out. He looked like a poster of a gringo. T-shirt, jeans, tennis shoes, baseball cap, and a small backpack. I felt safe, but I could feel beneath his smiles and words that he was very tense. He had a taxi waiting and appeared to know the driver. When we went to the hotel, then I found out he had several rooms in different hotels under different names in both sides of the border. I would walk across the border tomorrow at 11 a.m. alone with just a shopping bag full of gifts like a tourist. He then handed me a wig. At that point, I knew there might be a problem. He told me there was a slight problem. He said the only help he had was the taxi driver, and that he was on loan as a favor. He did have intelligence information and was told that my grandfather did not believe the story of me staying with my husband for a few days, and faxed pictures, both myself and my husband, to most of the border cities. He had the pictures for my sister's sweet 15th party. My husband was told that the Mexican police on the bridge in Laredo spotted him, and he now had to assume the families were looking for both of us. He then reassured me with his favorite saying, "It's not a big deal. We'll work around it. Things like this always have problems." The taxi driver drove us off downtown Laredo, and he would drive my suitcases across the U.S., but stay close to me as I spent an hour shopping. My husband crossed right away and observed me crossing and going through immigration. Once through, a blue van came to me, and we drove straight to San Antonio and took a train to the East Coast. My husband had a condo rented with pictures of us out. I felt at home, safe and comfortable. That is the end of this part. The next and last part, working with the U.S. government, is just as crazy.